Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, The 5 Questions Every Business Case Should Answer, presented by the Director of Leadership Training at Watermark Learning, Andrea Brockmeyer. My name is Mariela Salinas, and I'll be assisting and moderating our session today. We are in Zoom for today's webinar, and we will be sharing a copy of this recording with you in an email after the session. We do encourage participation throughout the session, so please use the chat or that Q&A option for our short Q&A after the presentation. Educate 360 is so excited to present this webinar today. So without further ado, I will hand it over to you, Andrea.
Thank you, Mariela. I really appreciate it. And welcome, everybody. It's great to have you here today to talk about 5 questions every business case should answer. Really appreciate you taking your time out of your day to join us. So I want you to imagine that tomorrow morning when you sign in or walk in the front door, you are not what you currently are. You are going into work as the CEO, the chief of everything important, the top of the org chart. You are the one that makes the decision. And what you're going to find is that you are faced with the great idea line. People are going to be lining up figuratively or literally to have ideas about what should be done to do this or that. And what are you going to do? Are you going to just start writing checks for everybody? No, of course you're not. You're going to say, really, why should I do this? What is the reason for this? Bring me a business case, right? So I want you to think of being that person and thinking about how you're going to make decisions about which folks you're going to give resources to. Maybe some you're not. How you're going to know what are the things that you want to invest in. All right, so you're telling everybody in line to go bring me a business case. If you are now, let's say you're the one in line and somebody tells you to bring a business case or to write a business case, what is your first reaction? And so I just want to get some thoughts here from folks. If somebody tells you, and maybe you've heard that, are you maybe not sure? Maybe it's a matter of time. Maybe your idea is so fabulous, you don't need a business case. Maybe you know what they are, but you don't know how to write one. Maybe it's just not worth the effort. Maybe it's just like, whatever. Or maybe it's no problem. Yeah, we'll give folks a minute here. And maybe it depends, on who asks or just it's your initial reaction there. Okay, about another 10 seconds. A few more folks. Pretty good participation here. All right. Okay, great. All right, so there we are. All right, so quite a few folks, actually most folks, no problem. They know what a business case is. They know how to write one. Maybe here just to get some tips or thoughts about maybe a little different approach. Honestly, I thought there'd be a few more people that said, never mind. Forget it. Some folks know what they are, but maybe not how to write one. The time thing definitely is something. New idea to some folks. Nobody is so big on their idea that they don't think they need a business case. So that's always good news. All right. So what is a business case then? And a business case, of course, is all about the why. Like, why should we do this? And so we want to be thinking about, again, put ourselves back behind the desk of the top of the org chart there And why should we write a check? Ultimately, that's what we need to feel good about, is that we are making a good decision, because fundamentally a business case is a decision-making tool. Now, that's not the only thing though. A business case also has enormous value in that it confirms alignment. I don't know if you've ever worked in an organization where there were a lot of things happening at the same time. Things were very fluid. Things were changing all the time. There's fires here. There's, lights out over here, things going on. And sometimes it's easy to lose alignment. Like, what is it that we are all trying to achieve together? Also, it's a shared understanding. It is a document that, by communicating, is making sure that everybody is understanding why an investment is being made, which isn't always the case. And I mean everybody at the top, the decision-making folks, but also the people that are doing the actual work. When there is shared understanding there, things are going to work a lot more smoothly when we hit road bumps. So that idea of collaboration, because most of us aren't doing initiatives without needing to work with others. So that idea of everybody contributing when needed, and you get a lot better collaboration when people are aligned, have that shared understanding and that buy-in. Remember, the business case is an input into that project charter, for those of you familiar with project management artifacts. This is something that's even before the charter. So from a project management standpoint, having a business case is awesome, because that it's going to be, a lot of that is going to be reflected in the project charter. And so that just gives a little depth and some roots to that project initiation. So, and I'm just going to open up chat here. Who should write a business case? Who do you expect to write a business case? What would be some roles that you would expect to write a business case? Anyone with an idea? BAs, yeah, we definitely think, actually, technically, if you want to look at frameworks, business analysts we typically think of a business case as a BA artifact. Business owners, yeah, analysts. Anyone requesting a new team, love that, right? That takes resources. An asset owner, nice. That could be any asset. It could be a product. It could be teams. It could be artifacts. Program manager, project manager with input from a project sponsor. Nice. Project manager, BA. Ooh, those hybrid folks. Excellent. Love all of those. Absolutely. Yeah. So BAs, PMs, business relationship managers, product owners, line managers, people working in agile environments, traditional environments, hybrid and blended environments. This is not a waterfall traditional project environment thing. If you're working in an agile environment, that does not negate the need for business cases. The people writing the checks still need to know that the dollars are going to be put to good use, right? So PMOs, people in the strategy office, C-suite, right? I love that very first answer. Anybody with an idea. Again, if somebody's going to come to me and say, hey, I've got this great idea, we need money for this, I'm going to say, it's why? I've got plenty of checks to write this week. Tell me why I should write one to you, right? So here is an outline of contents that you might find in a business case. And by the way, I just want to echo what Mariela said earlier. If you've got ideas or questions or comments, use the chat. Let's just, I'm talking here, but don't hesitate to chime in. So here are some business case contents. It looks like kind of a meaty list. There's a lot of things there. And I think it's helpful a lot of times to have a template like this. But I also think it can be helpful to, when this feels a little overwhelming, which is, I think sometimes we think of a business case as something like this, which, like I say, I was expecting more never minds because it can feel a little overwhelming. Instead, think about, what are the questions that they're going to ask? What are the questions that you would ask? For example, if somebody were asking you for money for their latest great idea. So question number one, you have an idea, you want me to give you resources for it. What's wrong with what we're doing or what we have right now? What is not working with the status quo, right? And if the answer is, well, no, the status quo works, then you go to the back of the line or go back to work, right? So we need to define the situation. What is it that's going on right now? What is the business need, right? What is it about what we have that is not working for us? What is the rationale for making a good investment decision? And again, a business case is fundamentally a decision-making tool. And we're not the decision maker. We present the business case, but that doesn't make us the decision maker by any stretch, right? We don't own that decision. And the thing to keep in mind is that we want to make sure we're getting to the actual need. And what might we be getting at there? Well, people can say there's a need. People can say that, have all sorts of ideas about what the business need is. But a lot of times they get distracted by things that are either impacting them or what they feel passionate about. So we need to make sure that we're talking about what the real need is. So it does take a little bit of sleuthing and to really make sure that we have a good objective presentation, right? The business case is not a vehicle for pitching our favorite idea that we think is going to be great for us. It's got to be, the actual business need. Yeah, sometimes they have, yeah, right, their own format, and they maybe only accept business cases in a particular format, and that may be. I will bet that you will find the answers to these questions or some form of these questions in there. And I think, that mental model of thinking about what question do I need to be able to answer helps me get that objectivity that I need, because I can get really excited about an idea. And so if I think about being on the other side of the table, it helps me with objective. What would I want to hear somebody say? I mean, I want some passion and energy, but because they understand what the business need is, not what it's going to mean for them or their team or their area. But yeah, absolutely. But it's interesting, after this webinar, go back and see if there aren't these questions that are answered somewhere there. Yeah. So you want to make sure that business case aligns with the organization's strategic objective. Hopefully you have access to, clarity around what that is. Some places people know exactly what that is. Other organizations maybe not be as transparent about that, which is not necessarily an intentional thing. It may be just that they don't talk about it that much. But you want absolute alignment to what you're thinking about and what you're proposing and helping the organization move forward. Because again, if I'm thinking big picture, the people that we present these to are thinking big picture, right? They're not thinking about what's necessarily right in front of us or our team. All right, so the business need, the current situation. Question number two then is, how bad is it? We've just explained that maybe our current processes were designed when we were a $2 million company, and now we're a $40 million company. Our processes, aren't scalable. Okay, so what are the consequences? How bad is it? And we need to spend a little time then analyzing and think of this as a separate situation or a separate section of a business case. That first one is just defining the business need, total objectivity, just the facts. A good situation statement, it should be something that nobody raises their hand and says, that's not true. It's totally objective. It's just the fact. Now we get into analysis. We're going to dig a little bit. We're going to make sure that we are solving the right problem. This takes some courage sometimes to make sure that we aren't just looking for data to support what we want, but to really make sure that we're, doing 5 whys or Pareto or a fishbone or process analysis in a relationship. some kind of tool, really digging to make sure that we've got the data and a really compelling analysis of what it is that is going on and how bad it is. That helps the recipient of our business case start to identify, okay, is this going to be something that we want to invest in? Does it make sense to do that? So we want to spend some time, and in fact, most of our time should be spent in the analysis. Okay. So we've articulated the business need. We have analyzed the current situation. And then question number 3 is going to be, so what do you think we should do about it? Okay, great. What do you think we should do? Now, this is where we always want to start, right? We've got our great idea. So this is where we're going to talk about what our idea is. But the thing to remember is that we're presenting this to decision makers, and decision makers like to, no surprise, make decisions. So a business case is not a justification for an idea that you have already settled on. And maybe you've got an idea. Maybe it is a great idea. Maybe that is where you end up. Maybe all of the analysis points to that. But you want a good, solid business case provides options. It's not just one thing. And an option could be doing a part of the whole idea that you have. It could be maybe there's a technical part and a process part. Maybe it's separating those. And don't forget the do nothing option. That's always an option too. We could do nothing. Usually that's not a very appealing option once you've done the analysis or presented the analysis. Although maybe maybe they say, this is really really compelling. Not at the moment. Maybe you've planted a seed, painted a picture that gets them thinking about it, and maybe they think about it for a later time. But a solid business case provides options. So one of the things you want to make sure, and again, this alignment is so important, making sure that you're anchored to that business need. That's, after all, it is a business case. So your options need to directly address the business need. Whatever are the pains that the current situation is causing, your solution options should map to that in some way. There should be this idea of traceability. You can do this in a lot of different ways. I've done it where you sort of have, in each section, you've got identifiers A, B, C, or something like that. And so all of the A's follow through. And now, I've got items in the current state for that are, say, B. And then analysis, you've got supporting analysis that's B. And then you go down to recommendations, and so that it's easy to trace back up to the business need. This is another just an example of a part of a grid where you've got, the different analysis results of things that aren't working, things that are problematic, and each option then, how does that address each one of these pains? That not everything may address every one of the issues that are being faced. But that can help people if they're particularly interested in one particular aspect. They can see which option. It's just a visual way that helps people digest what we're saying rather than just thinking about how this is a great idea. Break it down for them. Make it easy for them to understand exactly what it is that your options are going to provide. So some things that you want to think about in your options, always, again, include the do nothing option. It is in fact an option. Be clear about how each option addresses the business need. Make sure that all perspectives are represented. That's one of the things we get excited about a business need in our area because, of course, that's what we're familiar with. But make sure that you're accounting for the team perspective, that you're accounting for the management perspective, that you're accounting for the perspectives of people who are dependent on the outputs that your team members provide, that you think holistically about it. And it's not shown here in this particular grid, but you could have something like this that would say, let's say, for example, that our recommendation is B. We might want to identify why we didn't choose C and D. Make sure that people understand, you're going to make a recommendation from one of the options. Why were the others not selected? And then do a cost benefit and risk analysis for the one that you recommend. Okay, so again, if I recommend B, somewhere I'm going to have identification of risks. What are some of the risks with this? That's a reasonable thing for people to be thinking about. If you don't identify, you can be sure that the people you're presenting it to are. And cost benefit, right? They're going to need some data around that. Don't let yourself be intimidated by that, however. I think sometimes people think a business case and they immediately go to numbers, they immediately go to dollars, and either that's not their cup of tea, it's not something that they're comfortable with, they don't have access to the information they might need. Don't let that be a deterrent. Do what you can. Work with people as much as you can to get a sense of that and quantify the best you can. Of course, don't make up numbers, but you need to have some idea of cost benefit. A business case may not be something that is, you put the final period at the end of the last sentence and there it is. They'll probably go back if you haven't had access to folks that can provide more detailed information. Others will do that. So don't let that deter you from making a business case. And then question number 4, you've got your recommendation, you've presented options, you've made your recommendation, and now they're going to, they might say, great, what will that take? Hopefully they say, great, what will that take? So they're going to want to know, right? What's that going to take? So we need to outline it for them a little bit. Now, importantly, this is an implementation approach. This is not a project management plan. This is not going to be details. Again, a business case, an input into a charter, which is then an input into the plan. So we're not going into super detailed information here. We're trying to present enough so that as somebody is listening to our idea and wondering, okay, what's this going to take? We give them enough to get a good sense, right? Because we don't know. We haven't, assigned resources or anything like that. But, are we talking about building, buying, some kind of combination? Are we looking at working with vendors? Can we do this in-house? Are we thinking this is a 3-month thing? Are we thinking this is a 2-year thing? Do we have a couple of key milestones that we could identify that would help them get a sense of what the pace of this might look like? And any dependencies? I mean, are there things that are being done right now? Maybe there's some kind of technology upgrades that need to be in place before we could do this. What would be just an estimate of the budget for implementing the recommendation? And again, this is not a hard and fast numbers. This is getting a sense. This is that rough order of magnitude stuff. We talking $250,000? Are we talking $2.5 million? What are we talking here? What are the resources that would be needed? Is this going to require the entire IT staff? Is this going to require a couple of resources from IT, some team members from a couple of different areas? What kind of management might need to be involved? Machines, testing from an external vendor. Are there some compliance things that we might have to contend with that would require some external resources? Who are the stakeholders, departments, and divisions that would be impacted, right? Who all is this going to impact? Up and down and out? Are there other projects that would be impacted? And then just a high level org change management strategy. Big picture, and again, this is not an org change management detailed plan, but if this is going to be a lot of people change, and that's what org change is, it's dealing with the people side of change. We're talking a lot of process change, a lot of maybe reorg, those kinds of things. What are our thoughts about that? Do we have an org change management department? Do we have people that do that? Are we expecting the project manager and or the business analyst to do that? What are going to be the hardest things for people to absorb? Have we accounted for that in these milestones if it's going to require a lot of change? What kind of training are we thinking of will be needed? What kind of resistance might we anticipate? Where can you find good reference for budget estimation? I would say break it down high level. You know, what you're looking at, people, training, technology, those kinds of things, and talk with project managers, talk with people that have maybe experience with the kinds of things you're thinking about doing. Look at past projects. You know, and remember, a rough order of magnitude or an estimate is a range, right? So, you know, be wary of presenting your numbers as, you know, when I did say 250 million or 2.5 million. You know, maybe we say we're looking at maybe 150 to $300,000. You know, it's a big range. A rough order of magnitude is a big range. So think about presenting it as that. That's technically what an estimate is. But I would break it down a little bit and go find folks that maybe can help you get a little insight into past experience with some of those pieces. That's one place to start. And maybe you've got financial people that can help you that have done budgeting. Kind of depends on what maybe your PMO can help if you've got that. Yeah. All right, and then the last question. Okay, I understand what the business need is. You clearly have an understanding of what this is all about and what the consequences and why we should care. Got an idea of what we should do about it and got an idea of what it's going to take. But how will we know this is really going to be worth it? And this is the part that a lot of people don't do, and not just individually, but I think sometimes organizations aren't always so good at this. And that is to have an idea, think ahead of time as to how are we going to know that we delivered the value expected? What is the success criteria and what is the value that we are expecting to get out of this? And importantly, how are we going to measure that? How are we going to measure that and report on it after it's done? We get in a very project mindset. Project is over, we do our final lessons learned, and presto, we're done. Yeah, well, not, right? We're not just done because we do not know at that point, typically, when you turn it on, whatever it is, that usually doesn't tell you immediately whether it was worth it or not, right? We need to be looking a month out, 3 months out, 6, 12, 3 years out. Are we generating the results that we expected? And very importantly, we need to know how are we going to get those numbers and are we currently capturing them? We need baselines from what we're doing right now. If, for example, my fabulous idea is going to improve process efficiency by, you know, make things work more efficiently, that sounds great. Like by how much? And how are we going to measure that once we make these changes? And are we measuring it now? Because you can tell me how fast you're doing this, how many, you know, orders you're processing or whatever it is after we implement this. But if we don't have something to compare it to, it doesn't mean anything. You haven't demonstrated improvement at all. So this is a big opportunity areas to come up with some thoughts around what are we going to measure to know if we've made it, if we've moved the needle, and are we measuring it right now? So top 5 business case pitfalls to avoid. Not identifying risks. You talk about the risks. You don't have to go into deep details on them and mitigation and all of that, but just identify what are some of the risks. They'll be thinking about it. So it's good for you to think about it. Glossing over the approach, including cost. We get so excited about our idea, we don't think about actually how we make it happen. That's the other benefit of doing a business case. It's not just for your audience, it's for you too, right? To think through your idea. Presenting only one solution and not including the do nothing option. Leading with the solution. A business case doesn't lead with the solution, right? It leads with the business need. And then not having that clear alignment to the organizational strategy. Make sure you are really rock solid on that. So we would love to work with you in any area of skills development. Here is our family of brands. And this would be great. So check in with us. Here are a couple of classes that you might find helpful along these lines coming up. We'd love to see you in any of those as well. And feel free to link with me on LinkedIn. I'd love to be connected with you. And that is what I've got. So thank you again, everybody, for your time today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Andrea. And thank you to our amazing audience that participated today. I went and dropped in a little bit more info on some of the classes that Andrea has here on the screen. So take a peek at that or go ahead and visit us at watermarklearning.com for a little bit more info about everything. We had a quick question. I know we're a little over, but I would love to get to this question. Where can I find a good reference for budget estimation? Great question.
Yeah. Oh, I saw that. That was the question I was
Oh,
saying to, yeah, to break it down at just a high level to make it
perfect.
easier. And then because obviously your idea is new, so nobody's going to say, well, last time we did that. So what pieces are there? And then can you find past projects to go to? Project managers that might be able to help you with that. A lot of folks writing business cases don't necessarily get to march into, say, the CFO's office and say, what were the dollars that were spent on these past initiatives? So but work with maybe PMs, a PMO, find people that have some experience on the pieces. Yeah. And
Excellent.
and acknowledge the limitations of your cost estimates too. What are you working with? Again, don't let that be a deterrent. I think too often people don't want to think they don't have what it takes to do that part of it. Do the best you can and start to develop that practice in your organization. It'll benefit you as well as I say as well as your audience.
Fantastic. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your fantastic insight, Andrea. And quick question here. You will absolutely get a follow-up recording in your email after this. So that will be your on-demand presentation. And this will be registered as half a PDU under, I would say, ways of working, right, Andrea?
um
Or would this be
yeah,
more
business acumen.
business acumen? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
You,
yeah,
hey, I believe you.
yeah,
Alrighty, business acumen, half a so yeah, that would be half a credit under business acumen. You can just put the name of our webinar title, and that should get to everyone. Alrighty, thank you all so much for joining us again, and
yeah,
we'll hopefully see you all very soon in the classroom.
yeah.
Alrighty,
Thank
thank you
you
all so
again,
much.
folks.
Bye.